You will be liable to all of your big customers waiting for their coffee, and that was a matter of life and death for the companies.
Have you ever wondered what happens if the unexpected happens and you cannot deliver what you promised? So stick around, because in this episode you will learn exactly what force majeure is and how you can use it. But remember that it can be different in different cases.
Yep.
So stick around, because in the end of this episode you will learn exactly what it is and how to use it. And we have Kat here with us today to explain the force majeure. Let's go.
Let's go. Well, like you said, all force majeure clauses are not created equal, but the fundamental, let's start with learning what it is, what is
Yes.
equal. And that is that we're talking about you and me entering into a contract, an agreement, that I will perform something, or let's say you will perform. Let's say that you are a coffee producer in the US, and you get all of your coffee beans from Latin America. And you have an obligation against your customers. You have Starbucks, you have big customers.
Of course.
Going great. Yeah. So what happens if something happens in Latin America that makes it so that you cannot deliver what you promised to your customers?
Okay, and what can that be that happens, like disasters in like COVID, pandemics, and such things
Yeah.
that you cannot control?
So what's the basic of the force majeure is that it's something that is unexpected. The parties, you and I, if you're the coffee producer, I'm Starbucks. You and I, we did not anticipate it when we entered into the contract. That's number one. Number two, it was outside of your control. So, given that the force majeure is a safety net for you, it's a way for you not having to perform and not being held liable for it, it's important that whatever happens is outside of your control. So you cannot manipulate it to get out of a contract. So that's number two. And number three is that the unexpected that is outside of your control makes it so that you cannot deliver. And that is also very important, because let's say you, the coffee producer, and you source your coffee from different parts of Latin America, and one of those regions suffers a hurricane. Well, then, does that really make it impossible for you to perform? Or can you just source more coffee from the other regions? So that's an important aspect to think about.
Okay, well, in that case, how should you think? I mean, the force majeure is not, you cannot use it if it's just in one region, or the catastrophe.
Well, that's a complex matter to discuss, and that's also, you can think about that when you design the force majeure.
Okay.
Yeah, so, well, you asked me firstly what it can be.
Yes.
And typically you heard like the hand of God and something uncontrollable. So anything from natural catastrophes to war to strikes, where the labor union, something like that. And it can be a pandemic. And this clause became really famous during COVID.
Yeah.
Because it became obvious that some force majeure included a pandemic and some did not. And that was a matter of life and death for the companies, if they were to be held liable because they could not perform or not. So it's really a key clause. And it can also be if a war breaks out in Latin America. If you have an applicable force majeure, your company will most likely survive, because you have a right to suspend your obligations. But if you don't, you will be liable to all of your big customers waiting for their coffee. And in such a case, you might not even survive as a company, because it's such a big hit. So the force majeure is very seldom applicable, but when the time comes, it's very, very, very crucial.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think a lot of companies think about that after the pandemic that occurred.
Yeah, you can really see in the contracts that the examples, because typically you say like a natural disaster, like a war, that the examples go much longer now, and now they include a pandemic. That can be good or bad, because something similar, what is that? what is included and not. So you can never, we're talking about the unexpected. So you can never have the perfect clause that states everything. Because if it was that foreseeable, then...
Yes.
Well, as regards the question you asked about how to think, if it's part of Latin America and I source my coffee from different regions, that's super important. And if you're the seller, you will want more of a right to utilize the force majeure when you want. And to say that, sorry, I cannot deliver, if that's how you feel. As a buyer, I will want to push you to deliver. And I mean, imagine that the hurricane makes it so that you cannot deliver, get your coffee through that boat transport that is super cheap, but you could actually get your coffee on time if you used airways instead. But that would mean that it cost you 3 times as much, and you would actually lose out on every delivery that you do. So what is that you cannot deliver? I mean, or do you have to build a new warehouse in some other part of the world, or start up a new production entity? I mean, most things can be solved if you go to the extreme. But a force majeure should be it's unreasonable to demand that you solve it some other way.
Okay, so it don't get misused.
Yeah.
Okay, but what is the most common mistake that people do?
Well, that's one. Thinking of it from the buyer or the seller perspective, right? Like, not, do you think that it's a boilerplate, that every force majeure looks the same? And it doesn't. So sit and think, if I'm at the coffee shop instead, how important is it for me to get the delivery, and how easy is it for me to find somebody else that can deliver it? Because the next question comes, what should happen? If we agree there is a hurricane, it's a force majeure, you cannot deliver the coffee on time, that's fine. So you're not held liable, I cannot sue you for it. Should that mean that I have a right to tear the contract up and find another coffee producer? Or should it mean that your obligations are suspended, and once the hurricane season is over, we pick up where we left off and you can keep on delivering?
Oh, but can you write in the contract like a certain amount of time, or so you know when to start again or when to not?
Yeah, you can say that as a seller, you would like it to be suspended. Remember that. Seller, you do not want to lose your business. You only want to make sure that you're not liable during the period you cannot perform. So as a seller, you might say that it's suspended during that period, but as soon as possible, and you can have a long stop date of 6 months because it can't be unreasonably long. But as soon as possible, you will pick up the business again like nothing ever happened. As a buyer, I might want to go and negotiate with other coffee producers. So I might prefer that we tear the contract up, that I have a right to just say, okay, you cannot deliver, then I will find somebody else and we can negotiate once you're back on track. So that, remember, who are you in the contract and what serves you the best? And another thing that you should think about, depending on what you deliver when you're the seller or the buyer. What if, when the hurricane hits, you still have 100 kilos worth of coffee beans in your warehouse in the US, but you have about 1,000 kilos of coffee beans to be delivered to all of your customers? As a seller, you will want to have the right to decide who to deliver the last coffee to, right? Because you might want to prefer your big customers or the ones that pay you the most. But you as a buyer, you want to make sure that you are prioritized. So you might want to work into the agreement something about you being the number one customer, and that if there are any leftovers in the warehouse, you will be prioritized, or at least not forgotten.
That sounds like a smart clause.
So there are many things that you can think about in the design of what the consequences are. And another thing, you as the coffee producer, the seller in this case, it might be that you have some add-ons that you deliver, and you can think, do I want to deliver what I can? I cannot deliver the coffee, But perhaps you're also selling some services where you do online training for the baristas of the coffee shop. So you can still make some money. So you might prefer to be able to do the add-ons, the other services. Or you might write some blog posts about your coffee beans and why they are the best tasting in the world. But me, as the buyer, I might want to prefer that we suspend everything, because those add-ons are not really worth anything to me if I am not selling your coffee live. So that's also a difference. Which side of the table are you on?
So, I mean, it's very important to draft it in your advantage.
Indeed.
It sounds like a superhero thing to do, a class to have in that case.
I mean, COVID showed it.
Yes.
In many cases, it's actually about going bankrupt or not. Because if you're held liable for not delivering all of these goods or services, it can be impossible almost to survive.
Yes. So I think it was really hard, especially for the coffee business.
Yeah. And also good to know that different jurisdictions can have some fundamental principles, like the principle of frustration or force majeure. But we're talking about the contractual design here.
Yes.
What you can do, how you can control the situation and work it to your benefit. Because know your contract, know your business, and it will pay off in the end.
Wow. Amazing.
Amazing.
And now you learned how the force majeure works. And remember that this is not legal advice, it's knowledge we're sharing here.
Yeah.
And it's really, really fun to share this kind of knowledge.
Yeah, and we're hoping that no more pandemics or anything.
No more pandemics.
But as time has shown, things happen.
Yes.
So let's be ready.
Yeah, it's better to be prepared. And I think a lot of businesses will be that now.
Indeed.
So now we learn about the force majeure, you know how to use it. And as we said, be prepared.
Be prepared.
And don't forget to subscribe and like, because we're going to keep doing this more business law to you at zero cost. So I see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.